שלום לכולם, ברוכים הבאים והבאות, הבאות והבאים. אני רם אייזנברג, אני מורה כאן בפקולטה בחינוך טוב, ויש לי את הזכות והעונג לארח את פרופסור דונטה שולר מאוניברסיטת קובלנץ עכשיו. אני אציג, actually I'll do the introduction in English so everybody understands, and Donata understands me too. So Donata and I met about, 3 years ago, when I was doing my research on the goodness feeling in nature. But actually we met after I completed the work, the research. And then I met her in Switzerland, and later we did some collaboration in Iceland in a workshop. And Donata is a professor of philosophy now in the University of Koblenz. She did her PhD on close talking.
No, that's
No,
not
I'm confusing. Okay.
Humility.
So, on humility. Actually, I think it would be easier if you introduced yourself. I would just say a few things about you as a friend. So I think Donata is a wonderful friend and a wonderful teacher, and the way that she introduces the subject, which is a very, I would say, a difficult subject, in particular in our culture where we expect things to be clear, and what Donata deals with is the level that is before clarity, and how clarity comes about. So, and she has a way of presenting it in a very clear way. It is very much related to something that we've started developing here in the Technion. It is studying focusing in relationship to creativity and to the design professions. And I think that Donata will speak a little bit about her current research, the ECT project, which actually has a lot to do with going across disciplines and seeing how this process comes about in different disciplines and in different ways of thinking. But without further ado, I think that Donata will introduce herself, and if I need to say something, I will.
Okay. Well, first of all, Ram, I want to thank you very much for inviting me again. That's a great chance. I remember the last time I was here, it was such intensive and fruitful work, and it inspired me a lot. So I'm very happy to be here again. I always have problems telling people what I'm researching, and because there are so many ways so many ways to approach what I'm researching. And I'm very glad that Ram gave me a lead, which makes it a little bit more simple. Also in philosophy, especially in contemporary philosophy, maybe also in reaction, to metaphysics, which has become more and more unclear and more vague. There is a strive to clearness, which cuts away everything that is not clear, and meaning is researched always in terms of finished propositional meaning. And so in the course of my research, I've become more and more interested in this process that we can develop meaning, that when we are filled with an idea, we have the big problem that we cannot immediately say why it matters, why it is important. It is exactly because we have an idea which seems very, very important to us that for a long time we cannot really say anything which satisfies us. Yeah? And this is a very, very strange process, because in some way we have nothing, and on the other hand we have almost too much to start. Yeah? And it sometimes takes half an hour, sometimes takes months, sometimes it takes years to develop that. And this is a huge, challenge for philosophy and for philosophical theories, because there's this very crude imaginations that ideas are something we have in our mind and then we can represent them. We need to have them in our mind and then we can represent them and then we can talk. And also communication is understood in terms that we have something inside and then we tell it to somebody else, yeah? And then we know what we want to say and the other person understands it. But that most communication really doesn't work that way. That by communicating, we start to know what we mean. It's very strange because it means that we don't represent what is inside. Another basic concept is we construct what we think. But constructing doesn't work either because we cannot just say what we want if we are really serious. So there's something in between. And I wrote a book about it which will now appear at the De Gruyter publishing house. And it's really very much about this developing of meaning, and I call it close talking. And maybe you have heard in the humanities, and I don't know how it is here in the School of Architecture, but we have a term of close reading. Do you know this? Close reading? Yes. So like the philosophers are champions in really, really slow reading. You read one paragraph of Kant for many weeks, yeah, and you don't feel bored. And after many weeks, it's a totally different universe. This paragraph or this page. And of course we know it with theological traditions. The deeper you go, the slower you can read. And I transformed this concept for talking. We have small talk, which is very quick. Small talk, our normal way we talk. Please come in and find a nice seat. So this concept of close reading helped me understand that we do the same if we speak. Yes, there are ways of speaking that we can barely touch what we are really. There are ways of speaking that really prevent us going deep. It's a very good cultural construction that we can go safely from one topic to the next without sinking into the complexity. Yes, and they're masters of, and it's a whole culture. I call it small talk. You have small talk in parties, but you also have small talk in academic discourse, where you safely, exchange concepts and you know what you're talking about, and there is no point of kind of being overwhelmed by the complexity one is dealing with. And so I termed this close talking that is possible to also, like in close reading, it is possible to do close talking, that is to stay with an idea, to stay with an impression, to stay with a feeling, and to speak from this. And sometimes you have to speak again and again and again, and it opens up more and more, and it is very repetitious, but while you speak, something evolves, which was not there before. And I want now to yes.
Maybe before we get into the lecture, yes, to talk about the whole overview of the workshop, yes, what we will do.
That's a good idea. Yes. Mm-hmm. So this morning, I want to introduce you to this concept of close talking and about this development of meaning. And after the lecture, I would like to work with you like a little bit in a seminar setting on concepts of body and environment, which lay a totally different ground on a very basic level that helps us understand, also the feeling function in thinking differently, which helps us understand by very, very, very crude, different ways of conceptual cutting how deep each situation is. And I took these paragraphs from Eugene Genlin's A Process Model, this process model is a book which continues to think major philosophical traditions, phenomenological traditions, pragmatist traditions, hermeneutic traditions, but also cognitive scientific traditions, trying to say we need a different starting ground to understand the complexity of thinking and to go beyond this subject-object cut, which kind of stifles a lot of creative processes, but also stifles the way we understand ourselves. So in the morning, we have this lecture and going into these concepts and doing exercises with them, because you can immediately feel the change with different kinds of basic concepts of body and environment. In the afternoon, then, I will give a little bit an introduction to a research project which grew out of this research, and it's called Embodied Critical Thinking. It's a collaboration of philosophers and anthropologists. The University of Iceland is a part of it, the University of Aarhus, the Interacting Mind Center in Denmark, Stony Brook in America, University of Koblenz, the Microphenomenology Institute. And it's about, if we start to understand thinking differently, well then it's also, we must venture into finding different methodologies of thinking. Methodologies which help us access the richness of embodied experience for thinking. So that will be the afternoon lecture. And the exercises after that afternoon lecture will be the same as this morning, because I think it will be a different group. It will be a student group, and I will do with them the same exercises. So those who will come, again, after the lecture, you can, except you would really love to do it again, you can leave.
Let me just add that the afternoon lecture was added after we already had the workshop. So it's within a philosophy course given at the faculty. So Donata added another lecture, which is thank you. But there will be an opportunity for people who didn't hear the morning lecture to come and learn about it in the afternoon. And those who are here this morning who want to have extra information than that, the lecture in the afternoon is not the same as the morning lecture, right?
No.
What time in the afternoon?
It's from 3:30, and the lecture would be, it's from 3:30 until 6. How long would be the lecture part?
45 minutes or
So
something.
from 3:30 until 4:30.
Yes. And then tomorrow in the afternoon, the workshop will be only practicing. I will introduce you to some steps, to some basic steps which we research in our Embodied Critical Thinking research project. It is especially, these steps are, we work with two bodies of methods. One body of methods come from the microphenomenology research, and the other comes from Eugene Gendlin's work, and we especially elaborate and inquire into his steps thinking at the edge. And tomorrow I will introduce you to steps from thinking at the edge, and I want to invite you to really bring, topics, issues, questions which are with you for a long time, maybe research projects, and those steps will allow you to really engage with your specific experiences, with actual experiences, and to see how they function in your thinking, how they enrich your thinking, how they might make your thinking more concrete and precise. Yeah, that would be the workshop part tomorrow.
Yeah. So just to say that the workshop tomorrow is an opportunity for everyone to really go deep into something that interests you, and that would be like a kind of a boost to any kind of research or thinking project or something like this. A booster.
Yes. And then, of course, there's still, as Ram suggested, was Ram's idea, individual sessions that people want to come in and deepen some aspect of rich unclarity in their research, as that we can also work one-on-one, or you can also come two, and I work with together, because a very promising part of this research is that one can learn to use the other team much more with little changes. One can transform a team to be a very, very helpful environment, and that's especially if we learn to listen in ways which at the beginning seem awkward, but then become such an opening environment. So if you want to come too, we immediately also do the listening exercise, which we will also do tomorrow.